Hey everyone, it's Wuju Senshi here again, and today I'm bringing you a guide on something that I've been getting requested to make a video about a lot recently, and it's why I start wolves. So basically, I'm going to be making a video about my jungle pathing preference, how I like to clear as Yi, specific jungle pathing, which is a pretty unique jungle pathing that I only have just recently learned about and started doing, and I love it. That I like to do was specifically Yi, your early jungle clear, and also talk a little bit about how to do that clear properly, including kiting camps, which you can do as Yi, even though it's not as, there are other junglers that it's much easier to do it with, but you still can do it as Yi, and you can really maximize the usage of his passive with this camp kiting and just these different methods that I'll talk about. Um, and also explain why I like this jungle path clear, which is starting wolves leashless. So basically, the idea behind the advantages of why you want to have a leashless clear is because it gives your laners opportunity to arrive to lane first, both your bot and top lane, which is really nice, especially in higher elo when those laners know how to use that advantage to manipulate the wave to crash towards enemy tower or basically it lets them manipulate the wave however they want to and avoid their lane getting into a bad state where it's vulnerable to ganks, and also allows them to establish prio for you later on when you're trying to contest scuttles, yada yada yada. Basically, it's really great to give your laners the opportunity to establish, lane dominance. And Mastery doesn't even really need leashes, so it's perfect. Mastery doesn't need leash, and your laners can take advantage of not having to leash you. So Wolf start and this general clear in general is pretty nice for that. Another thing about this route is that it's pretty much the same speed as doing a normal clear. Assuming this is a leashless clear, it's the same speed as clearing, starting from your buff. So if you were to start from blue buff here, blue Gromp to wolves, and then go towards your red side, this clear path actually ends up being the exact same speed. And it's because you're going to end up making use of a blast plant over here, and you're also making really good usage of your passive, your double strike that is, because you're pretty much always hitting things until you've cleared all these three camps, which I'll demonstrate to you in a second here. So basically, it's great. You make really good usage of your passive as well as your Q damage. I'll show you that as well. And yeah, there are more reasons for why this clear is advantageous, but I'm just going to go ahead and show it to you first. Hopefully I do not mess up anything. Alright, so you start by hitting the wolf that's on the side farther away from your blue buff. So what I do is every auto attack, I try and walk away from it. And when I have my Q up, I try to use it to dodge an auto attack. Here, I wait a little bit to hit the wolf the second time, to keep my double strike passives going. And then I'm kiting away from this blue buff. Again, even though my alpha strike was up for a few seconds there, I didn't use it until right as the blue buff was about to hit me. Here I smite Gromp, and I pull it away. And see, I leave the blue buff at about a 180 HP and then I alpha strike the Gromp when those two are close together, so that the alpha strike bounces to both the Gromp and the blue buff. So anyway, that was maybe a lot to cover really fast, but hopefully you kind of caught most of the tips there. I did that pretty decently, I think. So here I'm gonna arrive to my red buff at about 234. Yeah. So this clear, you'll go wolves to blue, and then Gromp, and then straight to your red buff. You skip the raptors, and there's a reason for that. So there, when the red buff is about 350 HP, I Q it to one-shot it without having to take any more auto attacks from it. Here, I'm even kiting my Krugs here. And I smite the big Krug, because it's good to smite Krugs. Okay, and then after Krugs here, I usually look to go for Scuttle Crab here if it's, possible. It's not always possible. A lot of the time mid won't have prio or bot lane won't have prio. And if it doesn't, that's fine. You would just skip the crab and go straight to your raptors over here. But I'll pretend like I had prio in my mid and bot lane, and I can take this crab. So now I'm gonna do my chickens. Another thing about kiting with your chickens you can definitely do is every auto attack you want to walk into this bush here. Again, I mean, because I'm heading this way, so it's good to kite into this bush so I can head this way. So after I've done everything I just did in this exact order, my wolves are like, they've just spawned, so I can clear them another time. Again, kiting towards the blue side camps that I have up. And then my Gromp's up again. So after I finish taking this, I'll have about 1200 gold. And I'll hit level 5, and then I can base and get some really great items on Yi. So that's going to be the Talisman as well as 3 daggers. That's what you'll get. Talisman, 3 daggers. Or, well, you're waiting to heal up anyway. You're gonna hit, you'll get your 3rd dagger before you have to leave here. So this is a really good loadout for Yi, and I hit level 5, and I cleared efficiently without having to, you know, be too... okay, I got kind of low on HP here, but I had Smite up still, and I used my W as an auto attack reset, which I didn't need to do. So, you know, basically the point is I didn't have to be that low, and a lot of the time, if you're trying to clear more camps after one full clear as Yi, you'll start to get pretty low, and it's really hard to do. So that was basically me just showing you the clear. That's pretty much very close to what I do. If I don't take this crab and I go straight from Krugs to Raptors, then I'll usually, right after Raptors, go straight for this crab instead, and then go clear my wolves and Gromp, the second wolves and second Gromp, right after the crab. So that's the path. It's basically a power farming path that's really nice for junglers like Yi and also other junglers like Shyvana that like to, you know, take advantage of their fast and efficient clearing, and their hyper scaling champs that really like to hit their level 6. And you know, they're not as strong early game. They're not trying to gank a ton. They really like to power farm. Yi's definitely one of those kinds of champions. And this gets you to level 5 by your first back and lets you get this really nice loadout. These 3 daggers and the talisman, which also is really useful for clearing the jungle. And basically with this loadout, you should be able to, or with this pathing, you should be able to hit level 6 by 5 minutes 30 or 6 minutes-ish roughly, which is fantastic as Yi. That's really good. And also it just lets you, like, well, as I said, power farm. So I'll talk about some more specifics about why this path is nice. So I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but this clear is, I think I did mention this earlier, but basically doing this clear from wolves to blue to Gromp is just as fast as going from blue to Gromp to wolves. And the reason for that is because, one, this wolves pathway, it lets you take advantage of the blast plant here after you clear your Gromp. It also lets you have you constantly using your double strike passive. You know, because the way you kite from one camp to the next, your double strike passives those stacks never expire before you hit the next camp. And also you're making more usage of your Q damage. Your Q doesn't do as much damage overall when you just use it on one isolated target. The bonus damage it does to mark targets makes it worth it to use it on multiple targets if you can, as opposed to one. So I don't know if that made sense, but basically when I get my blue buff and Gromp close together here and I alpha strike to finish off the blue buff and then start my Gromp, and then keep hitting my Gromp, my Q bouncing between the two is more efficient damage output than just using the Q on one of the camps. You know, like normally when you're clearing your, you know, a single camp or something, you're just alpha striking it and hitting that one camp over and over again. So that's not as efficient. So these are all like very tiny details, but basically the point is you'll get to the only thing you actually need to know is that you'll get to your red buff after clearing your blue side at the same speed as you would have gone if you had leashless started your blue buff. So yeah, let's see. It's yeah, one of the major things I like about this is just the fact that you get to clear your wolves and your gromp right afterwards, and you're still clearing all of your minor camps in order. So remember, you go after your red buff, you're going Krugs to Raptors to Wolves to Gromp, and you're clearing your crab somewhere in between there. But basically, you're still clearing these minor camps in order, which means that after you back here and you start full clearing again, you can keep full clearing your camps in the same order from Krugs to Raptors to Wolves to Gromp, and the timers are still one right after the other. So that's obviously what you want to maintain throughout the game, is being able to power farm efficiently, one right after the other. You don't want to be waiting for camps to spawn. You don't want to not have camps to farm. You want, yeah, have that. That's just one of the things you like as you and power farming junglers, to be able to full clear all your minor camps in order, one right after the other, every time that they spawn, one right after the other, over and over. Another nice thing about this jungle path clear is you're not starting on either of your buffs here. So your red and blue buff will not be taken until a few seconds after the enemy jungler, because most enemy junglers take their red or blue buff first. So you're offsetting the timers of your blue and red buff spawns. You're offsetting it relative to the enemy junglers. So that means when the enemy junglers buffs are spawning, a lot of the time they think that means your buffs are spawning at about the same time, because they assume that both junglers started on a buff. So what that means is they might look to invade you right when their buffs are spawning, but first of all, they don't even know where you started because you went leashless, so it's hard for them to know where you started. But even if they do try to invade you, your buffs are not going to spawn at the same time as theirs. So that's another thing that can throw off the enemy jungler. That's, I guess, more of like a high level, advantage, that if you're in lower elo, it's not like enemy jungler is going to be thinking that smart, but it's still something that I think in higher elo especially can be used to your advantage. Also, this pathway is nice for you because it lets you play more reactively in the early game. If you go a normal full clear path where you go one of your buffs and then full clear, and then you take the Skull Crab after, you're usually at this point in the game where, like, you either need to back or you need to try and make some kind of a gank happen. Um, and backing, I guess, backing wouldn't be bad, but you would be backing with something like 850-ish gold after a full clear and your crab. That gives you about, roughly 850, 900 gold-ish, as opposed to backing with 1200 gold, which this clear path lets you do after your hit your level 5 and you complete the path I showed you. So it's not ideal. A lot of the time you'd want to back a little bit later and get a little more gold, but what are you going to do, um, you'd have to try and gank something, or maybe you'll try to look to invade. It's just really awkward. You'd much rather go and clear more camps in your jungle, but you literally just cleared all of them in this order, meaning that if you were up here, you would have to go back down here to your Krugs all the way down there to try and clear the next camp that's spawning, which is really, yeah, it's just not ideal. Um, so it kind of puts you in an awkward situation where you need to, like, be forced to do something that's not, none of it really is great for you. Nothing sounds that appealing. This Wolves Clear Path lets you kind of take a step back, and just, you'll always have something to farm basically until again, if nothing happens, no lanes to gank, no junglers to fight, nothing happens, you can just full clear, farm well, hit level 5 after the Grom, back with 1250-ish gold, and get these nice items. But if something happens while you're doing that, it's really easy to, like, respond to that. Sorry, that's my alarm. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you clear, if you start wolves, you do your blue Gromp, the same wolves clear path I'm talking about, you go to your red buff, maybe while you're doing this, the jungler ganks top. If the jungler ganks top, you don't have to clear these camps. You can go straight to take this bottom skull crab here, and then gank bot, or, invade or whatever. But you'll still have, like, your own camps to clear right afterwards. So basically, it lets you, like,
Turret
always
plating will
have
fall soon.
something to do and camps to clear early game, but you also don't need to be forced into doing anything that you don't want to do, really. And if the enemy jungler shows up here, then, or the enemy jungler shows up somewhere, then you can react by going to do something else. So I'm not sure if I really explained that well, but basically it just means you always have camps to clear on your side of the jungle, and it lets you play reactively to what the enemy jungler is doing early game, and gives you multiple options to respond. Which is really nice to see early game, because you don't want to have to be forced into doing things early game. If the enemy jungler is exerting some kind of pressure, you want multiple options to be able to respond and do something with, the jungler showing themselves somewhere. Hopefully I explained that in a way that makes sense. Um, let's see. I explained that. Just look at my notes here. Also, the blue side camps in general are more valuable this season because of the jungle experience changes they made to monsters. So you want to be clearing these camps as soon as they're up, because they're relatively easy to take and they have a lot of value. A lot of bang for buck, a lot of golden experience that they give you for how easy it is to take them. And this clear path will always have your will always have your blue side camps be the highest level of your camps. So, you know, say your Krugs are level 3, your whatchamacallit, uh, Raptors are level 3. If you start full clearing this way, your Wolves are going to be level, I don't know, yeah, level 5, and your Gromp's going to be level 5 too. So it keeps basically makes sure you're farming your blue side camps really efficiently and keeping them high level and constantly clearing them, which is really good this season, because blue side camps are really valuable. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think that is pretty much it. Um, like, the only thing that's better than this clear, in theory, and I never get it to work in my solo queue games, but it would be to start red buff and then go Krugs, Raptors, Wolves, Blue Gromp, and then um, get your crab up here, and then go back all the way back to Krugs, and then do this whole full clear path again. That gives you more gold when you do your first back. But like I said, it's really hard to do, uh, because you'll just be very low on HP and mana, and without even going back once, it's hard to take these level 3 camps, all of them, the second time without backing even once. But if you were to only take 2 of them and not take the others, then your jungle camp timers are going to be put off. So basically, it's not ideal. It's pretty hard to do. And I also want to put a full disclaimer out here that this whole wolf start jungle pathing thing I'm talking about here, I'm not totally sure it's like some hidden strat that's OP and it's going to be the new wave or anything. But it's definitely something that I've been enjoying doing lately. I've been finding success with it. And so far, whenever I look at it, it seems to make just seems to make sense. It's logical. And maybe people try it, or I'll try it more and find more flaws about it. I don't know. But so far it tends to be a really nice farming route that still keeps your camp spawning in order, lets you not have to rely on a leash, lets you hit level 5 back with the 1200 gold without getting too low or having to waste any time. And yeah, just lets you power farm early, and also just kind of also mess with the enemy jungler's understanding of what your pathing should look like, and makes it hard for them to invade you and steal your camps, and just gives you more options in general, I think, for how you want to respond to things in the early game, which is really nice. You're trying to scale, you're not trying to be forced into anything, which is the best way to get Yi behind and then control him for the rest of the game. Is once he's behind, you can abuse his, early game weaknesses. And yeah, that's it. I guess the last thing I want to mention is there's one other like clear path you can do here. That's especially if we're talking about trying to avoid invades. You can start one of your buffs with a leash, or without a leash if you want. Just go buff to buff. You probably already know about this clear path, but I just thought I'd throw it out there as something that I've sometimes done when I'm really, like, if I'm against something like a Graves, a Nidalee, and a Lee Sin. Those are champs that love to invade. So like invade sometimes right after the first buff. So sometimes if I'm really worried about that, I'll just go buff to buff, and I'll try to usually start the same buff the buff on the same side as where they started. So basically, if they started red buff and I knew they were starting red buff, I would try to start blue buff and go straight to my red buff. That just makes sure that's like one way to prevent your buffs from getting stolen if you take them right away. That's not what this video is about. So yeah, that is the Wolves clear path that I've been doing lately. I've been doing it pretty much every single game on my main account and my high elo accounts. So it's been working well for me, and I like it, and I'll probably still keep doing it. I don't see any weaknesses with it really. And if you have any feedback for me about the path, you want to let me know your thoughts, feel free to leave that in the comments below. And yeah, just as a refresher, one more time, if you're not sure what that clear path was, it's Wolves to Blue to Gromp to Last Plant to your red buff to your Krugs to this crab if it's up, and then if the crab isn't up, you go to Raptors. If the crab was up, you go to your Raptors afterwards, and then you go to your Wolves again and your Gromp again, and then you back. So right, that's it. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and let me know that it was something you enjoyed, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care.